Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner or regular shirt to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm an exercise physiology and nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
Hey, this is Dr. Mike D. Nelson, associate professor at the Kerrigan Institute, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, and still home in Minnesota.
And this is Wendi Irlbeck, registered dietitian nutritionist, certified International Society of Sports Nutritionist, and super excited to be here. I feel so blessed and honored. I've been following you guys for several years, so I just feel like I'm totally fangirling over here.
Cool. Wendi, are you going to ISSN this year by chance? Are you braving the physical world here?
Absolutely. I'm super excited about it. Yes, I am. So it's in, 2 weeks now?
Yeah, it's coming up fast.
Oh, gosh, yes, I guess it is.
You'll be there, right, Lonnie?
Yeah, Mike and I are going to have a room.
We'll both be there.
Yeah, we usually, Mike helps me wrangle, the students, herd cats with me, and try not to burden him too much.
I
but
don't have to do anything else.
You're sort of like the uncle of science to these kids, Dr. Nelson's coming, yay! Because sometimes they'll see you on a Skype, like a guest lecture in a class or something, And anyway, all right. I just have one study related to obesity today. This is brand new. I was just looking at it this morning, and I think a lot of our longtime listeners know. Like sometimes I'll go pull the full paper and do a deep dive. Sometimes we'll just talk about it, and then I point everybody else to go do a deep dive if they want. Because usually the methodology, how did they measure that again? And, sometimes there's nuances, but sometimes it's just fun just to do the analysis of what we have at hand. This one is very interesting, especially I overheard you guys talking before we hit the record button about, colors in the diet and what's healthy and what's not. And if you're going to talk about body composition, check this out.
Strength and muscle sport news.
A helpful reminder of BMI's nuances, but little support for the quote-unquote obesity paradox. So this just came out in the Journal of Nutrition, Kate Lysett and Jessica Kerr. And what they're going to do here is question this fat but fit mentality that some people have, or, challenge size acceptance maybe, and really try to drill down into more nuanced body comp when it comes to heart health. So here are just a few tidbits. It says, in the midst of an obesity pandemic, the notion of the obesity paradox is appealing. Could it be that despite having an overweight or obese BMI, I am actually healthy on the inside, that is, metabolically healthy? Media headlines such as fat but fit or healthy obesity can leave us questioning this rhetoric. So they're going to question this. So this is a commentary about some other research that's in this month in the Journal of Nutrition. It says, in their rigorous study, Zhao et al. Extended research looking at associations of body mass index with cardiometabolic risk factors, in this case in children and adolescents in China. But what they did was they calculated BMI, but they also used DEXA, and they calculated lean mass index and fat mass index. So listeners, if you're not familiar, right, how much lean tissue do you have for your height? Or fat tissue, specifically, not just body weight, because that's kind of vague. So it says the novelty of their study is to focus on LMI, right, lean mass index, as a risk factor for cardiometabolic health in early life. And most of our listeners have a very high lean mass index, right? They're purposely trying to accumulate muscle mass and be heavy for their height. And it does show up in our body mass indices as well. Anyway, it says when each exposure was split into quartiles, body mass index and fat mass index performed similarly, with the odds of all 8 cardiometabolic abnormalities gradually increasing from the lowest to the highest quartile. Right? So we split the population into 4s, essentially. So think every 25th percentile or so. The higher your BMI, or the higher your fat mass index, the worse off you were. And that's not surprising, really. Conversely, increasing lean mass index across quartiles was progressively protective against high total cholesterol and high LDL cholesterol. Similarly, compared with the lowest LMI quartile, so in other words, people with the least lean mass, the odds of hyperglycemia and insulin resistance, says, were higher yet similar in all other quartiles. In other words, these findings are consistent with previous literature in adults, showing that higher lean mass can be protective against cardiometabolic risks. It says, and they do not support the quote-unquote obesity paradox. Now, one of the things they were digging into this is not our population so much, of course, people that are jacked and heavily muscled, but they were actually concerned about people with a normal BMI, right, in the low 20s, of course, but really had no muscle mass, right? They had a low lean mass index. So in other words, their normal weight, but sort of flabby, if you will, fatty. Yeah, but they said they did not see any strong support for the obesity paradox. Again, this is in younger people, but it was consistent with the adults. They also, and I'm not going to dig into it here, but they tried to combine this obesity phenomenon with some obesity phenotypes. So they're trying to look at more a physical expression of the overweightedness. Anyway, the authors go on to just kind of finish by saying, we will be disappointed if other media declare this evidence, again from this Chinese study, that there is such a thing as healthy obesity, because they don't prefer that. I don't know. Thoughts, Mike? Have you ever seen anything about comparing BMI or critiquing it and involving lean mass index?
Yeah, I like that they actually did a lean mass index. I mean, most of the time I've heard of FFMI, so fat-free mass index, and there's a fair amount of literature on that, even looking at athletes and different positions and what sports they play and things of that nature. So I like that they did that. Hopefully maybe that'll be a new indicator in the future. And yeah, I mean, for people who are familiar with this debate, the fit versus fat, or can you be fit and overweight, Stephen Blair's been talking about that for many years in the literature. And I mean, similar to what they've concluded here, what I've seen and just from the literature is that you may grab a snapshot in time where you can find people who are, even a fair amount overweight and still be healthy. But if you look long enough and especially if they start gaining more weight, it's not real favorable. And then there's also a fair amount of difference potentially even in just different types of population and person to person. Some people can be, rather overweight to a point and not really have many metabolic factors get kind of screwy. Other people, especially clients I've worked with, they don't have as much room to gain lean body or not lean body mass, but fat mass. And you'll start seeing their, blood lipids. You'll start seeing all sorts of screwy stuff happen right away. So, yeah, it's kind of surprising to me that it's still a debate,
a thing.
And I think we're sometimes crossing physiology with psychology. If you're, feeling different about your body weight, then you can try to change it and get healthier via physiologic mechanisms, or you may need to see a psychologist possibly too, if it's more of a body image related thing. But it seems like we've kind of merged those all into one messy thing. I
thought about three things here, and then I'd like to get Wendy's perspective. But I remember as part of my own dietetics training, it became a little contentious, but we were sent to a website specifically. It was an online course about size acceptance. But it was presented very much from the psychological perspective. And, everything's biopsychosocial. And I'd be like, well, my bias is the biology and, tremendous amounts of obesity and body fat. That's very inflammatory tissue. I understand you're not going to body shame people, and that's not going to help.
A different question.
Right, exactly. But let's not, because it was really presented, it was almost like in defense of fat but fit. And I'm like, well, there's two sides to every coin. I just think we need to be kind of cautious here. And I understand that size acceptance and attractiveness has changed over the, centuries, even decades. The other thing is, one of my old advisors was a body comp guy, Wayne Sinning. He wrote a lot of the YMCA books. But he used to almost try to, scare me. Like, Lonnie, you're gaining all this, muscle mass. You realize that body mass index in itself, not just fat, is a problem. Your heart is a fist-sized muscle, and you're working it overtime, buddy. And I'm like, well, okay. Now we're talking about 20 years ago. So to your point, Mike, you'd think that we've been teasing this apart enough that it's not a huge problem. But I get it, right? I mean, I know a lot of heavily muscled people, and their blood pressure runs a little high and things like that. But when this article mentioned some of the glycemia data, we just covered that a few months ago, that if you have a ton of muscle mass and that's the primary healthy recipient of blood sugar, then good. You should have better glucose disposal. You should be sending it where you want, as long as the muscle's not real sore and, micro-traumatized. But it just makes sense if you have more muscle mass that I think you'd be healthier in general, despite, I guess a little bit more, cardiac work. But what are you taking away from this, Wendi?
First off, I love that study. I love the dialogue, the conversation, because I feel like among a lot of organizations, sports nutrition groups and the Healthy at Every Size movement, these are conversations that are happening about, what's acceptable for health and wellness. And I'm going to defer back to the science. There's zero benefit to having less lean mass. We know that, having less lean muscle mass is obviously affiliated with less strength, less mobility. And I always look at, too, thinking about the long-term effects of aging and the fact that we lose, about 8% of our lean mass every decade after 40. I go back to there's zero benefit to having more lean mass. And in fact, I think that, being respectful of people's desires for, psychology, Mike mentioned, but what is health and wellness? And I think being able to move well, to have good energy, to sleep well, to not have abnormal, biometrics, having a healthy cholesterol, blood glucose levels, all of that accounts for health, outside of some of the BMI. I think BMI is one of the most challenging. I don't like BMI. I don't use it as a dietitian in my private practice. I never discuss BMI with anyone. And there's a lot of physicians too that have even said, that's something that we're not using. But of course, the science and you guys are much more in that than I am on a daily basis. But I would just say that there's more benefits with having greater lean mass than not. And there's a lot of fit shaming that's going on out there too. So it's like, I think we all need to be kind, of course, but I love the science. I also love the psychology behind it. Some people can look in the mirror and they can say, I'm feeling fat today, when in fact they're very lean. They have a lot of lean tissue, and vice versa. It's kind of a loaded thing. And I just think as practitioners too, that the dialogue needs to always be positive and that we should never shame anyone. But I also think that it's pretty problematic, the direction that we're moving in as far as the obesity, especially with COVID-19 and the poor outcomes, of recovery and things like that. Yeah. So I think that it's important to have a within normal limit body composition, having more lean mass. There's literally zero benefits to being overweight and obese. So it's always a difficult thing. I never want to offend anyone, but I do want people to feel motivated to increase their lean mass. And I know this population is obviously, more focused on having, more lean mass, but I also think that there's a greater population that's at hand too, that, maybe they think that they have a lot of lean mass, but without doing the DEXA, without doing the testing, how do they really know that? So testing, not guessing, is really important. I'm kind of rambling now too. But I'm excited about it. There's fat shaming, there's fit shaming, there's lots of shaming going on. And I think we just need to understand that what's healthy is very individualized.
Can you guys tell me about fit shaming? I'm not that familiar.
As a woman, I get it a lot, especially someone who has prioritized increasing their protein. I eat, 2 to 3 times the RDA of protein, and as a dietitian, I'm very, I'm very frowned upon for that.
Oh, how dare you!
I know, right? How dare I get healthy or increase my lean mass, fight off sarcopenia for the future? But there's a lot of fit shaming going on. And if you're on Twitter, you can see it a lot. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of other fitness professionals and other people out there that experience it. And unfortunately, it's coming from some of the folks, in that specific community. And I always feel like I have to be careful what I say because someone will come and attack me these days. But it is happening on a very high scale because of, anyway. So I don't want to monopolize. You guys are having a really great conversation about the science, and I get very passionate about, the fit shaming thing. So I will get off my pedestal on that.
No, you're fine. I haven't been on Twitter for like 2.5 years because I found it was a trash bin fire, but I can imagine that happens a lot.
Dumpster fire is what I say.
Yeah. So I think that's a good discussion to have. I think my simple view is maybe we should all just help each other and stop shaming everyone for whatever they're doing. So.
Amen. Can you just say that to everyone?
Yeah. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about your origin story, Wendi. How did you become a RD working with all sorts of clients?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mike. So I started my education at Rochester Community and Technical College. So I'm a Minnesota native.
Yay.
I grew up in, go Minnesota, nice, right? We need more of the kindness in the world. So I started at RCTC. I did my associate's degree. I played a year of junior college softball. So don't hate on the small schools. I had a great experience. Being a college athlete has helped me be relatable to a lot of the clients and athletes I work with today. So played a year and then transferred to the University of Wisconsin Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin. And I did my bachelor's degree in health, wellness, and fitness. I was actually the very first person to graduate from that degree. I was originally in dietetics, and I think Lonnie could attest to this too. As I was going through the dietetics classes, I was finding that a lot of the science was old and outdated. And I mean, yes, I was young, but I was feeling really frustrated with the information because I was reading some of the ISSN stuff and I was just finding this is so confusing. I mean, what's going on with the messaging here? So I did not want to be a dietitian. It's interesting that I'm a dietitian now, but I switched out of dietetics, then went into health, wellness, and fitness. I thought I wanted to do more strength and conditioning, more personal training. And I went and worked for a United Health Group, Lifetime Fitness in Minneapolis for a few years, then realized, hey, I do want to be a dietitian. So I went back to the University of Wisconsin Stout, did both the dietetics degree and then also my Master of Science. And during that time, I acquired experience with our athletes at UW Stout. So I was doing nutrition education with the football team, the hockey team, basketball, cross country. And then I also landed an opportunity to work at the University of Florida as a sports nutrition intern. So I was under Liz Fox and Stephanie Wilson, learned a lot, the ins and outs of sports nutrition and just kind of how to fuel some of those elite athletes. And then wrapped up my master's, did my dietetic internship through UW Stout, traveling between Minnesota, Wisconsin, and then landed my first job with the United Dairy Industry in Michigan here, which I'm currently at. I'm in Grand Rapids at this time, but I was working with the United Dairy Industry for a few years and then decided to start my own private practice. And now I'm here and I'm doing my work remotely, which I was doing actually before the pandemic, but the pandemic has obviously created a greater need for doing more Zoom calls, WebExes, coaching people through email, and just enjoying the process. But I before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of on-site, corporate wellness, some sports nutrition presentations with some of the local universities here in Michigan, Hope College, Aquinas College. And then I'm also a dietetic preceptor for a couple of the local colleges here, and doing some mentoring and just trying to grow my business and continuing on. So that's like my elevator pitch, just trying to figure it out as I go.
Wow, that sounds great. And what type of clients or athletes do you work with right now?
Currently work with a lot of high school athletes, optimizing either weight loss, weight gain. So there's a lot of, 16-year-old linemen that are over 300 pounds. So how do we work with them to not only improve their relationship with food, but get their body composition in a healthier range? There's no reason for a 16-year-old to be over 300 pounds. And that's something that obviously a dietitian can play a special role in. But I also want to talk about the psychology part too, is creating a relationship with some of the local psychologists and even therapists too, because, nutrition and health and wellness, it's a multidisciplinary approach. So really bringing those folks to the table too. And then also some adults. I work with local endurance athletes, those that are training for a couple of triathlons, Ironman this coming fall. And then I also do a lot of nutrition education with the general population as well. Those that are looking to lose that 20 to 30 pounds, those that are trying to increase their protein intake, just need guidance on healthy meal prep. Maybe they want to identify their macronutrient breakdown. That's really what's amazing about being a dietitian, is having that knowledge and that training and expertise to really help people, identify the best way to eat for them, and, really making sense of the literature. And I think Lonnie probably can speak to this more than I can, that there's so much misinformation out there, and just helping people navigate that is a big part of what I do at any age, any level of athleticism, whether that be the recreational athlete to the elite athlete. It's just really exciting. It's an exciting time to be a dietitian and work in healthcare.
I'll ask Lonnie this too, but I'll start with you, Wendy. Do you think that education with nutrition has become easier in the last maybe 3 to 5 years because of access to information, or has it become harder because of social media and every person, whether they have a background in it or not, appears to be an expert in nutrition now?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think that we have a lot of the imposter syndrome going on. I mean, those that have the training and the education are often, not getting out there and having the difficult conversations. I think for most people, probably the influencers, it's frustrating because they are so confident and they tend to know everything because they read a Google article. Mm-hmm. I do think we have information overload right now, but I think, knowledge is power if we can use the right type of resources, knowledge, and apply that in the appropriate way. I really think that for the most part, like sports nutritionists and those acquiring some of those weekend certs, it can be problematic, but I think it depends. There's a lot of doctors walking around out there that have significant training, but they also sell out. They sell snake oil to make a buck, and they're doing, bad things, right? They're not thinking about the best interests of the client. They're just out to make a buck. And that's the same thing for dietitians too. There's an abundance of information out there, and I just think we need to filter, what's evidence-based and who's trustworthy and credible in navigating that and moving forward with it. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Yeah, that's perfect. What are your thoughts, Lonnie?
Wendy used the term influencer. I dislike that term. No, I'm not. I'm with you, Wendy, totally 100%. What I'm saying is just what you said. A weekend certificate, a guru, which by definition, they want some level of submission from their people kind of thing. Everybody is so eager in social media to offer tutorials. I see it with painting. I see it with nutrition. I see it with house repair. Everybody wants to, they're desperate to instruct, and they don't have the chops to do it. So I think, Mike, I would side on the side of the dichotomy that you were positing there was. Is all this information good or not? It's good if you can understand some of the key words or even the statistics or methods involved. It's bad when people don't know what they're doing, like these authors that we were just talking about. they're actually concerned that this most recent study could be used as, to bolster the fat but fit mentality, when in fact maybe that's exactly the opposite, or maybe people don't understand population specificity, which is why protein is so contentious. I think that's the main reason. It's just a population specificity thing. People get used to one thing and they form strong biases, and then they don't realize that it might be opposite in a different population. But yeah, I mean, there's hundreds of certificates out there. You get unlicensed gurus doing stuff in nutrition, and you don't often have people with graduate degrees offering these certifications, and so that becomes problematic, because let's face it, a lot of the certs they're profit oriented. They're the intent. They might say the intent is to protect the public, or it's just good. People can be more knowledgeable. But then I see a lot of people, they take this cert and they go start practicing nutrition and dietetics essentially, and that makes me cringe a little.
Lonnie, what you're saying is amazing. And I want to just say, Dr. Mike, I know you have the Flex Diet cert, and no, you're not a dietitian, but you are very knowledgeable and you provide evidence-based, learnings for people. So I just want to promote that there's plenty of people out there too that are not registered dietitians that still practice according to the science and do a great job within their scope of practice. So I just wanted to highlight that you do a great job with that, Dr. Mike.
Appreciate that. And I actually resisted doing a certification for a long time because of the reasons both of you mentioned. It's like, I don't want to be one of those yahoos out there like selling a weekend certification. I'm like, I hate all that crap. And then a marketing buddy pointed out, he's like, well, but what if you could actually get better information and design it however you wanted to do it and only attract the people that would be, interested in a more evidence-based system? I was like, oh. So my little screening question now is, if people write in, they're like, hey, what little letters do I get after my name after I complete like the 25 hours? I'm like, you can put whatever you want, but I don't want your money if the only thing you want is letters. So that's not the reason to take it. So just go away.
No, right. Wendi, that's a good point, which is why I always say people without graduate degrees. I mean, I much rather listen to advice from Mike than from a lot of other people I know. I mean, someone who's worked in, medical devices for hundreds of years. But the information and the understanding you have of something like, cardiac health and things like that, you've actually designed and monitored products specifically in that area. I'm very interested to see what you have to say. The certificates that sometimes come out of random PhDs, to me, it's really like the sniff test is, what's the intent of this? Right, and if it's to become more knowledgeable, that's one thing. But when people dance around the topic and they kind of let their certification people believe that then they can go practice, they don't usually come right out and say it. But you got to be real careful with that, So I'm not saying it's only personal enrichment degree or a cert. It can actually add to your other training. But yeah, to me, it's the intent of a lot of these things.
Yeah, it's just gets messy. Go ahead, Wendi.
I was just going to say, there's one thing that I've been seeing a lot of this, and this has been going on for years, and it's not that I want to talk ill of anyone, but there's a certain doctor out there that's promoting, fasting for days on end, and it's really problematic when it affects people that have a poor relationship with food. I mean, when you have those with eating disorders and they are not seeking it's a life-threatening ailment and it needs immediate attention. So when you have some of these people that are promoting fad diets that, people fasting on end, and then they're ending up with those binging and then unstable blood glucose levels, it's just, for me, it's really challenging and concerning, because I think credentials are great, but again, there's a lot of people with credentials that are out there destroying their clients' relationship with food and their mental health, and it's coming at the cost of significant challenges for those that are trying to help those people get back to a good, healthy place. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but like water fast for 5 days, you can't tell a 16-year-old to fast for days. They're growing, developing their tissues, and that is just it's so heartbreaking to me to meet these people and to hear that, well, this doctor told me to do this, and it just breaks me.
Well, so many of these certifiers, they're after a niche, and it's becoming harder and harder to find your special niche and why you're different, right? So they have to become more and more radical to get attention on social media, right? Because a lot of traditional practice has incorporated different things, like, let's take a look at intermittent fasting, or let's take a look at some of these different things, or ketogenic diet, paleo. None of this stuff is new. It's been around for decades. But people are a lot of these certificate providers, if they're just profit oriented, they're desperate to stand out, right, in a marketing way. So they become weirder and weirder in what they're pitching to people. And a lot of them start to incorporate, like you were saying, Wendi, the counseling, and they become generalized life coaches and success coaches, like Tony Robbins type thing. That seems to be the progression. So they go from weird niche to stand out to life coach over a 5 or a 10-year period. And you can see that quite a few times in the industry. So I don't know. It's just a consumer minefield.
Yeah, my running joke was I was going to have a fasting and meditation retreat at my place. So you're going to pay me a lot of money, and you're just going to come here and stare at the tree outside, and I'm not going to feed you.
Do nothing. Do nothing.
Yep. Does that. Sears has so many great videos on that. You pay someone so that they can tell you not to eat anything. It's wild. It's so effective too, right?
Yeah, and I do some intermittent fasting stuff, but I agree. I had this prediction 10 years ago when I started doing, some fasting stuff that, one, I never thought it would be trendy, but I'm like, if it does, it's going to end up going the extreme way of everything in fitness, where who's going to do the longest fast is going to become like the new pissing contest of, I did 24 hours. I did 3 days. No, I did 5 days. Well, I did 7 days. It's like, oh God.
Yep.
Context is key though, right? My concern is that I work with both adult and kids, and there's no 15-year-old that should be going 5 days without food. That is just unacceptable.
Yeah. So we'll take a break, and then speaking about nutrition, we'll be back with Wendi talking about some body composition tips and related to nutrition, especially protein and micronutrition.
Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, you know who this is. So I'm here to tell you about Dr. Mike T. Nelson's new book, Why You Should Eat Keto. I don't do it because, look at me. Come on, I'm fabulous and I'm fantastic. Anyway, you should text the Keto ebook, all in one word, to 44222 to receive your free copy. Do it now!
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go. Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio?
In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
And welcome back. We're here with Wendi Irlbeck, who's a RD, and we're talking about some tips for body composition, maybe a little bit in recovery, specifically focused on protein and micronutrition. So being an RD, you had mentioned earlier that you actually recommend more protein. My first part of the question is, why is that? And then do you think that's kind of changing, that more protein is becoming more accepted now than a few years ago?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I would agree that higher protein diets are becoming more acceptable because of the robust literature that's coming out, and people are really starting to recognize that. And I would say even the Academy of Nutrition, they've published some articles illustrating that, youth athletes need more protein. They've even gone as high as 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram on some of their blogs, which I'm really proud of, and that's great to see. I do promote higher protein with all of my clients. So regardless of if they're, fat loss focused or if they're trying to increase their lean mass, there's greater benefits with higher protein. And we know that the 0.8 gram per kilogram RDA is way too low. And we've seen that consistently in the literature. There's, more benefits to eating higher protein. You have greater satiety, you have more energy, especially if it's a high quality protein, those that are rich in leucine, right? The branched chain amino acid that's number one for muscle protein synthesis, found in eggs, dairy, fish, poultry. So I always tell people, we focus on, all right, what are your goals? And then from there, I determine how much protein are they going to need to consume per day based on their body weight and then their activity levels. And typically, rule of thumb for most people, it's been, hey, let's just start off our day. Let's power up with protein, making it practical. Because for most people, Mike, it can be really overwhelming that they're under consuming protein from the start because they've been told, oh, protein's bad for my kidneys, or protein will deteriorate my bone mineral density, some of this nonsense, just like creatine that we hear about as well. So I'm really practical in the sense of, like, let's break this down, so if you're, going to start consuming more protein, like, how much are you consuming right now? All right, let's focus on 20 to 30 grams at each meal. And then let's really optimize our recovery too by having protein around our training sessions. And we know that that's consistent in the literature. And it's pretty cool to see, more studies coming out too with, fat loss focused clients, and then even the aging population, the benefits to eating more protein. 2 grams per kilogram of body weight for an active, healthy adult is a great place to start. But I would say, sometimes more can be even better, especially if you're, less active. And some people too are chronically over consuming in carbohydrates, and then they're struggling with their body comp and they're not sure why. There's just more benefits from a satiety, from a, long-term longevity, and then even, our lean mass and tissue. So I'm very passionate about higher protein diets. I've authored a lot of blogs on it as well on both, my website and then also Simply Faster. And a lot of my young athletes too, their parents are totally on board when I explain, like, all right, we're trying to optimize muscle protein synthesis here. Let's do a casein-rich snack before bed so that we can optimize that recovery. Slow digesting dairy protein, really tasty to have before bed with, banana, kiwi, something of that nature. I'm really big on that food first approach. So obviously supplements have their place, but if we can consume our protein sources, through those high quality, high biological values, the beef, steak, fish, etc. That's really my ultimate goal.
Very cool. And with college athletes, have you seen that that's getting better? I don't want to throw the NSCA under the bus, but I probably just did. That they had some, we'll say, screwy things about protein for a while.
No, it's great that you said that. Actually, there was, I won't say the college, but one of their dietitians had posted about how you you can absorb more than 20 grams at a time.
Oh,
and it's
no.
like, no, I know, right? It's like, this is consistent in the literature. You absorb what your body needs and uses. So if you have someone that wasn't consuming any protein and they take in 60 grams, they're going to use all of what they need. That's, physiology 101. So it was very debilitating to see, like, well, you can absorb more than 20 grams. I mean, that's been disproven at this point. So I would say a lot of the colleges they're not behind. It's just that they have to be very mindful, of course, of, what they're being told. And I think a lot of the politics, so we'll just leave it at that most of those folks aren't as willing, I guess, to push the boundaries of the higher protein. So the 20 to 30 grams, we know that actually the 30 to 40 grams is very consistent with Stu Phillips. I mean, they've been showing that too. So I hope that the collegiate athletes get better information, just because it's in their best interest to consume greater protein throughout the day, especially when they're training at such a high volume during camp and, breaking those tissues down. They need additional protein. We need way more than, what that generic recommendation is for, healthy adults.
Yeah, I always tell clients, because the 20 or the 30 grams of protein at once, that's one of those, Lou Schuler calls those the zombie myths that just never seem to die.
Yeah.
They just keep coming back like all the time. So I tell clients, and even in presentations, I'm like, have you ever gone out and had like a 16-ounce like steak, and the next morning you don't have like a 16-ounce steak-shaped poo the next morning? Like your body uses it, right? It doesn't, just stay in one piece. And I only took 20 grams of it. Just get rid of the rest of it.
And there's I know this is, you guys have bodybuilders that tune in for your show too, but especially the ISSN, I think Joey talked about that at, I think it was like 2019, but they had bodybuilders on a high protein diet. I mean, they were consuming 5 times the RDA of protein, right? And they had no increases in their fat mass, and they were maintaining their lean mass. So, I mean, you can consume a higher protein diet and you won't blow up. I know that's shocking to most people, but
yeah. And you can even get a whole book on it if you want, I think. Correct, Lonnie?
I believe so. I believe that's true.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was looking up.
To put you on the spot.
No. Mike. I was just looking up a few years ago. I wanted to give the actual date. When you said it's not like you're excreting a whole steak-shaped, turd. The Ig Nobel Prize were a couple of, I think they were like paleo nutrition anthropology guys, and one of them swallowed a shrew, I believe it was, an entire small rodent to test, because they were interested in, obviously when you look at fossilized feces, that's how we know about ancient diets, and they wanted to test the ability of the digestive system, and I would just have everybody go take a look at that. I'm not suggesting you go freaking do that. But
full disclaimer, you have to say that these days because people will do it.
But
no consumption of shrews, please.
But if anybody is thinking, that you can't digest, a big old hunk of meat and connective tissue, I would have them go at least follow up on those researchers. Like I said, it was one of the Ig Nobel Prizes, which is sort of a joke prize, of course, for radical and weird science. And anyway.
Wow.
Oh, that's crazy. So in addition to our protein, we should probably get some micronutrition in. I know that we'll say by certain groups and certain people that it appears vegetables might even be bad now. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so
Broccoli's out to kill you.
Anti-nutrients movement. Yeah, I have so many thoughts on that. Honestly, people do not consume enough colorful plants in their diet. I mean, I always say too, like what works for one doesn't always work for another. There's a lot of people out there doing, carnivore diet. They feel better without some of those high fiber, high antioxidant foods. And I mean, if that works well for you, that's great, but that's not the majority of the public and the population. Plus, there's so many benefits to our colorful fruits and vegetables from a anti-inflammatory standpoint. I mean, they're also incredibly rich, sources of micronutrients that also help us be healthy, fight off immune infections, illness, and especially, decreasing delayed onset muscle syndrome. So, I mean, especially for athletes and those that are training hard. there's a lot of benefits to consuming, blueberries, tart cherries. I can't say enough about having a colorful plate, because most people are under consuming plants and over consuming heavily processed foods. So I think it's really important for people to incorporate a fruit and vegetable with every single meal. 3 to 5 per day is the recommendation, but 9 to 11 is a much better range for people to strive for. I know Precision Nutrition has some really great infographics on how to prepare fruits and vegetables. I've sent actually a lot of my clients those things, because a lot of people aren't cooking these days. But high vitamin C. I mean, citrus fruits, bell peppers, broccoli, kiwi, berries. I mean, all those items are very, very nutrient dense, and fiber is really important too. Talk about satiety and managing blood glucose levels, which also drive our focus, cognition, concentration. I wish people would consume, more fruits and vegetables because of the satiety, the fiber. Also very hydrating too. You look at the amount of water that are packed in our fruits and veggies, which is really important for most people that fail to drink enough water.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I noticed too, and I've done this experiment a couple of times, which it's not eating a shrew, but I did super heavy partial squats and basically gave myself patellar tendinosis. And then I tried eating a lot more fruits and vegetables. I was making little smoothie shakes and all sorts of stuff. And every time I've done it 3 times, that when I dramatically increased my micronutrition amount, my joint pain got better. And so I've noticed that with some clients too, where it's I'll look and go, yeah, you had 2 fruits and vegetables. Maybe we should bump that up. And a lot of times some of their aches and pains, not all the time, depends on what they have going on, but more often than not, I was kind of shocked that a lot of their joint pain and things, just the little niggly stuff, gets better too, which is an interesting anecdotal side benefit.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, we know the benefits too. I mean, the late onset muscle syndrome too, as well, for aging adults that have that joint pain, the aches and aches and pains. It's just amazing. You have those testimonies too, and people can connect the dots that consuming more of those plants, they feel better. They have better energy. That's amazing.
So what is your big tip to actually consume more fruits and vegetables? Because I think most people are probably on board with that, but maybe they need a few more tips to make it actual practical in their plan each day.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of putting them into omelets, sauteing with your steak, your fish, chicken, baked sweet potatoes too. You can make a really tasty sweet potato fry in the oven, right? And yeah, that's also going to help carbohydrates, refuel those glycogen stores, beta carotene too. I mean, you're just getting all these benefits, but adding them into smoothies is also a good idea. I don't like it when people juice, because you remove out the fiber, and then you're just getting all the sugar and calories, and you're removing that digestion process. So I would rather people stick with, sauteing, baking in the oven, adding them also to baked goods. You can do a spinach protein pancake. I have some recipes on my website.
Spinach protein pancake. Huh.
Yeah, and it's a very neutral flavor as well. So, I mean, what you can do is take the spinach and blend it up with even a banana too, and then add some coconut flour, some cow's milk, and an egg. Put all of that into your mixer, and then assemble that and throw it on a skillet. And there you go. You can meet, your protein, carbohydrate, and your vegetable needs all in one. And even muffins, things like that. But smoothies are also great too. I mean, for the majority of people that are on the go and being super busy and active, you can blend up some berries with some spinach. That can make for a great post-workout recovery shake as well. Throw your creatine and your cow's milk, Greek yogurt, whey protein in there, and you're set to go.
Awesome. I know you're a big fan of berries in your oatmeal in the morning, Lonnie.
Actually, I just read something not that long ago that phytates and whole grains may help you absorb the anthocyanins from blueberries. And I thought, hot damn.
Oh.
Right? Because that's how
there
I
you
do
it.
Go. But to Wendy's point, I've actually used white bean flour in small amounts in pancakes. And I'm a fan, and I know you do this with, like you often point out, Mike, is with the drinks and the shakes and stuff.
Yeah.
Blenderizing and pulverizing veg and just adding it to everything. I think it's one of my favorite functional food trends, because you can get broccoli, and sometimes it's something you wouldn't even think, wow, you put that in a shake or a pancake. Yeah, as long as you don't overdo it. It's a way that you could easily sneak in several servings, I think, of fruits and veg during the day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Egg bakes are good too. I have an egg bake recipe on my website, but you can blend up, your broccoli, spinach, bell peppers. You can get in, again, leafy greens are rich in iron as well. And then you're consuming the vitamin C, you're enhancing that absorption. Eggs are obviously rich in choline. I mean, those baked goods, you can throw in any type of shredded veggie too. I would encourage everyone to get a food processor or a really good chef's knife to dice all those things up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the tips and everything. We really appreciate it. For people who want to reach out to you, or potentially as a client, or to make sure they follow all your information, you're always putting out a ton of information. It looks like everywhere, as far as I can tell. What are some of the best sources and places for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you both for having me. It's a real honor to speak with you both. It's intimidating because you're both so brilliant and smart, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. And I can be found on my website, nutritionwithwendi.com, and that's Wendi with an I. I'm also very active on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm happy to connect with anyone if they have questions on improving their body composition or even identifying the best macronutrient breakdown to support their goals.
Awesome. And you have a newsletter too that I think they can get on via your website, correct?
Oh, yes. Thank you for sharing that. I just started a newsletter. Yeah, so you can just go right to my website and it's available currently free, and you can sign up for recipes, tips, tools, and I also throw in sample menus. So if you are deciding to be plant-based, that's a little spoiler for next month. I have a plant-based menu as a sample for you, optimizing some of those higher protein plant sources. So thanks for sharing that, Mike, and I look forward to seeing you guys at ISSN.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're excited that you'll be on ISSN again, which is always a good time, and I'm sure we'll probably have a little report from down there for people who can't make it, and look forward to seeing everybody down there who can make it. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed day, guys.
Cool. Thank you.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the IronRadio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.